Hello, history lovers! November 10th, 2025 marks the 50th anniversary of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald. I'm hoping to finish this video in time to have it released on the anniversary, but due to copyright issues with hoping to use the song that made the shipwreck famous, I don't know if I'm going to be able to complete it in time, but hopefully this video will be seen by my viewers before the month of November is out. Now, my interest in the Fitzgerald, I'm surprised I didn't hear about it sooner because I'm from the Great Lakes area, and of course that's a big deal here. Now, I first heard of the Fitzgerald when my mom and I were watching a news broadcast that covered another anniversary of the sinking. I want to say it was the 20th, but I'm not 100% positive. She mentioned that she remembered when that ship sank and that she had a record of the song by Gordon Lightfoot. It's kind of ironic that I can't use his actual version of it because he himself was not strict about copyright. In fact, someone else used the melody he wrote and wrote lyrics for their own song, and when he heard about it, he thought that was great that they liked this melody enough to use it. But I'm going to try to use the home free version. Hopefully that works. Their version is also excellent, so hopefully you enjoy that. Let's get started talking about a bit of the history of the Fitzgerald before I get into the song. She was launched in 1958, and her launching was pretty dramatic to say the least. When she slipped into the water, it created such a huge wave that one of the onlookers had a heart attack and died. It also took, speaking of bad omens, I know that there's no bad omen as bad as that, but it also took 3 tries to get the champagne bottle to break when they christened her. Both are seen as severe bad luck. But for 17 years, the Fitzgerald had a great career. She set records for both the fastest trips carrying iron ore and for carrying the heaviest loads. So, with that being said, let's start talking about her final trip. And let's get on to that by using the song and talking about the lyrics and how close they are to the truth or what might be inaccurate.
Legend lives on from the Chippewa on down of the big lake they call Gitchigumi. The lake, it is said, never gives up her dead when the skies of November turn gloomy.
That's one of the most haunting things about this song and about Lake Superior. The lake, it is said, never gives up her dead. Now, why is that? That's because the water is so cold. And not to be morbid, but just explaining, someone who drowns out in that lake, their body will not decompose the way that your body normally would. That cold preserves the body, and the gases don't build up in the body to bring them to the surface the way the gases would do with a normal drowning victim. With any other drowning victim, I should say. No bodies of the Fitzgerald crew have ever been recovered. However, on an expedition to the ship in 1994, one body was found, although not brought to the surface in respect to the wishes of the family. The family members have all said the Fitzgerald is the grave of those crewmen. That's where they belong. It's uncertain if the body that was found in 94 belongs to any of the crew or if this is the body of someone who happened to have their body washed near to the wreck. It's hard to say because there are over 6,000 shipwrecks on the Great Lakes. 6,000. Now, as I said, the family have determined that the Fitzgerald herself is the grave of the crew. But I will be talking later on in the video about a memorial that they had so that they have a place to pay their respects on land. Now, continuing on with the song talks about just how much iron ore the Fitzgerald was carrying that night. I've often wondered if that played a role in the sinking. If you're taking on water, of course, you don't want extra weight to be bringing you down. Also, that might have played a role because if you picture a bottle of marbles and water poured in between the cracks, you're not going to notice just how much water is in there. The crew knew that they were taking on water, but water going in between the iron ore may have hidden just how much water they were taking on. And the iron ore load herself, before they even left port, had the ship so weighted down that she was lower in the water than she normally would have been.
With a load of iron ore, 26,000 tons more than the Edmund Fitzgerald weighed empty. That good ship and true was a bone to be chewed when the gales of November came early.
When Gordon Lightfoot wrote this song, he didn't set out to be entirely historically accurate. He wanted to commemorate the crew of the Fitzgerald and basically tell their story. Although overall the song is pretty accurate with only one notable mistake I'll get to soon. Now, had Gordon Lightfoot never written this song, it's possible the Fitzgerald would have been one more of 6,000 shipwrecks out there. But she was very popular during her career. For a long time, she was the largest ship on the Great Lakes, although at the time of her sinking, they had built ships that were larger than her there. When she was launched, it was said she was the largest vessel on fresh water. Now, part of her popularity also came from her captains. She had 4 different captains over her career, and one of them liked to blare music as he would go. He was known as the DJ captain. He would also comment on the Fitzgerald as she went through the Soo locks. He would get on the intercom and he would call over the speakers giving info on the ship. He was not the captain when she sank. Captain McSorley was captain. But Captain McSorley was very experienced, as the song said. He had 44 years of experience sailing the Great Lakes.
The ship was the pride of the American side, coming back from some mill in Wisconsin. As the big freighters go, it was bigger than most, with the crew and good captain well seasoned.
I forgot to say the name of the DJ captain before. It was Captain Pulser, and the captain on the last voyage of the Fitzgerald was Captain McSorley. I've always been fascinated by the Wisconsin connection to the Fitzgerald because Wisconsin is my home state. She was actually leaving from Superior, Wisconsin, and if you're trying to find that on the map, it's near Duluth, Minnesota. However, she was not bound for Cleveland, as the song says. She was bound for Detroit. But Detroit doesn't rhyme with feelin'. The iron ore she carried would have been used in the automobile industry. Now, when they set out that day, the weather was pretty good, but they were told storms are going to be coming. Expect winds of about 30 miles an hour, waves about 10 feet high. Not fun conditions, but nothing that the Fitzgerald wouldn't have been able to handle. She'd been in many storms like that before. Yeah, that weather forecast was just a little bit off. And I'll get to that soon. But now Captain McSorley tried to play it safe as best he could. Partway through the voyage, they ran into not literally ran into, but they encountered the Arthur M. Anderson. And, yes, Sage, I know you're there. You're not going into the other room. My cat's meowing. But now, Captain McSorley of the Fitzgerald and Captain Cooper of the Arthur M. Anderson got talking over the radio, said, yeah, bad weather's coming, might be a smart thing to do if we stick together on our voyage for as far as we can go. Which is what they did. But there was nothing they could have done once the storm began to get as bad as it was going to get.
The wind in the wires made a tattletale sound, and a wave broke over the waves. mentioned it too. 'Twas the witch of November came stealing.
The song refers to these storms as the Witch of November. And Gordon Lightfoot was actually inspired to write this song after reading an article in Newsweek magazine called The Cruelest Month. It's well known that November is the worst time to be on those lakes because of those storms. Now, I said before that the forecast said 30-mile-an-hour winds, 10-foot waves. Yeah, try 35-foot waves, some reported, and try 90-mile-an-hour winds reported at the Sioux Canals.
Dawn came late and the breakfast had to wait when the gales of November came slashing. When the afternoon came, it was freezing rain in the face of Hurricane West Wind.
Now, when I first heard this, I thought Hurricane West Winds was a mistake because, of course, we don't have hurricanes on the Great Lakes. However, as I said before, in some places the wind was as bad as 90 miles an hour. 74 miles an hour is the start of a Class 1 hurricane speed. So while the storm wasn't as big as a hurricane, didn't have that swirling motion, the wind speeds were definitely hurricane speed. I find it highly interesting that the next part of the song mentions the cook, because here's some sad trivia for you. The cook on the Edmund Fitzgerald that day, Robert C. Rafferty, he wasn't supposed to be there. The ship's regular cook was sick with ulcers, and Mr. Rafferty was a last-minute replacement. Talk about your bad luck.
When supper time came, the old cook came on deck saying, "Fellas, it's too rough to feed ya." At 7 p.m. the main hatchway caved in. He said, "Fellas, it's been good to know ya."
That's a slight inaccuracy, the way they have the cook say that, fellas, it's been good to know ya, as if everyone expected that they were going to die. That wasn't the case. When they passed Caribou Island at about 3 in the afternoon was when they first started to have trouble. But they thought their pumps could handle it until they got to Whitefish Bay, which was the next closest port. Captain Cooper of the Anderson wondered if they bottomed out, because north of Caribou Island is a shallow area of the lake, and if a boat scraped her bottom there, it could open up a hole that would sink you. The Fitzgerald lasted until 10 after 7 in the evening. Would she have lasted that long? Depends on how much water they were taking and how big the hole was, but that was Captain Cooper's theory. Another theory was that 3 huge waves that Captain Cooper saw swamped the Fitzgerald and forced her down. It could very easily have been a combination of those things. If she was already starting to go down by the bow, 3 huge waves, that would have done her in. Something about the Fitzgerald that's caused speculation is she's actually in 2 pieces. Did she break and that caused the sinking, or was she already sinking and, like the Titanic, the weight of the back part of her just snapped? And that's why she's in 2 pieces. Would she have gone down either way? There's one other theory about the sinking that's talked about, and there was actually a dive done in 1995 that found air vents had been caved in, and they think that's where your water started to come in. It's possible, in the right conditions, that those openings could have let in as much as 4,000 gallons of water per minute. And that would easily sink a ship. The song refers to the hatchway caving in, but later when Gordon Lightfoot sang this, he changed it to "It was 7 p.m., it was dark, it was then," rather than "At 7 p.m. the main hatchway caved in," because the hatchway caving in could imply human error. In a tragic bit of irony, on October 31st, 1975, less than 2 weeks before the sinking, the ship had undergone an inspection, and the hatch covers and the vents and everything, they were found to have damage from previous storms. But the inspector said, "You should be good for another voyage. Just get them fixed before next shipping season, and you should be good." Had the inspector said, "No, you're getting those fixed before you head out," would she still have sank? Again, we don't know, because we don't know for sure that that was the cause of the sinking. It happened so fast, there wasn't really time to be certain. They knew water was coming in, but when the Anderson radioed the Fitzgerald, said, "How you doing? Are you hanging on?" The last contact when the Fitzgerald said, "We are holding our own." The Fitzgerald had been sailing ahead blind because in those storm conditions no one could see anything, and the storm had taken out both their radar units. So they were essentially going blind, relying on the Anderson to tell them their position based on radar. The Anderson was watching them on radar, and between one radar blip and the next, she disappeared.
The captain wired in, he had water coming in, and the good ship and crew was in peril. Then later that night, when his lights went out of sight, came the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
I can't include all of the song, as I said before, for copyright reasons, but the song does mention how they were only 15 miles from Whitefish Bay. That's tragically close. Captain Cooper, of course, made it through the storm, brought the Arthur M. Anderson into port there, and he was immediately asked, "Will you go out again and help search for the Fitzgerald?" It's understandable that his initial reaction was, "We barely survived, we're gonna die if we go out there again, no way." But he thought, maybe there's some miracle. Maybe she went off radar for some other reason. Maybe there's something that I can do. And he heroically went out there to search, but of course, there was nothing to find. The wreckage was found days later, thanks to radar finding what they believed to be the Fitzgerald underwater, and it turned out to be later confirmed they were correct. However, as I said before, I mentioned some other theories of why she sank, but to this day it is not for certain what caused her to go down.
They might have split up or they might have capsized. They may have broke deep into water. And all that remains is the faces and the names of the wives and the sons and the daughters.
The day after the tragedy, the Mariners' Church in Detroit, referred to in the song as the Maritime Sailors' Cathedral, rang their church bell 29 times, and that's one of the most iconic images of the aftermath of the tragedy. It's especially moving when you think of each ring of that bell standing for a life. Now, in the song, Mr. Lightfoot refers to this as a musty old hall in Detroit. He'd never been there at the time he wrote the song, and later he visited there and performed the song there, and he felt so bad because there was nothing musty about that hall. And he apologized, said, "Look, I'd never been here before," and ever after, when he performed it, he always said, "in a rustic old hall in Detroit." And those of the church said, "We're just glad you wrote this song. We're glad that these lives are going to be immortalized. The people are always going to remember them through this song."
In a musty old hall in Detroit, they parade in the Maritime Sailors' Cathedral. The church bell chimes, till a ring 29 times for each man on the Edmund Fitzgerald.
There's two other bits of information about bells. Now, there was a diving expedition in 1995, and when the divers went down there, they recovered the bell of the Fitzgerald for the family. The families all said, we want their bodies left in peace where they are, but they still wanted somewhere to pay tribute to them on land. And the divers brought up that bell and installed it as part of a monument at Whitefish Bay. Now, if Whitefish Bay ever decides they no longer want that bell, it will go to the cathedral to the Mariners Church in Detroit. As of yet, the bell is still in place there, and a new bell was installed on the wreck with the names of all the crew members who were lost. Now, the Mariners Church of Detroit did one other very nice tribute. For the first few years after the sinking, they continued to ring the bell, their church bell, 29 times. Later on, they added a 30th ring to commemorate all those lives lost on the Great Lakes. Gordon Lightfoot died on May 2nd, 2023, and it takes a lot of talent to write and perform a song like this, and to commemorate what he had done to preserve the memory of the ship. The church bells rang 29 times, plus that one, plus another time in honor of him, and I think that's pretty nice that they did that. So this is a solemn anniversary, but it's nice to remember things, that people who have gone past are not forgotten. And that's one of the reasons I love history, is that I always think of the individuals who make up these stories. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and until next time, take care.